Some people ask me, why don't I celebrate Christmas? I'll tell you why I don't celebrate Christmas. I mean, because I know truth. A lot of people don't want to hear this truth. And then when you say that you know truth to religious people, that just comes across as something being blasphemous because immediately their minds are conditioned to turn off anything that has something to do with the contradiction of what they've been taught and indoctrinated with their whole life. Now, I'm just keeping it real with you. I'm not trying to be offensive to anyone. I'm just telling you what it is. Christmas was created by Europeans who were afraid of the winter solstice. Understand that in Europe, theology and complex theological concepts did not exist in Europe, not until after their encounters with Africans or Kemetic people. You can go all the way back to ancient Greece when they conquered ancient Kemet, somewhere around the New Kingdom, somewhere around the 4th century BC. So anywhere between 650 BC to around 500 BC was the time that the Greeks came in and conquered Kemet. And when they did, they came in and they more or less diffused their culture with the culture of Kemet. It wasn't like they tried to erase the things that Kemet had in place that helped them to govern and rule Kemet and the surrounding territories for over thousands of years. One of those concepts that the ancient Kemetic people used was theology. Now, the Greeks came in, and many of the Greeks thought that the theology out of Kemet was savage, it was barbaric, it was something that was un-European or non-Greek. So it was frowned upon, and it would continue to be frowned upon until many centuries later. However, around 53 BC, in come the Romans. The Romans, one of the first things they did once they seized control over Kemet was to burn books. Now, why would someone want to burn books? Why would anyone want to burn books? Why would anyone want to burn books? So what was it that they were trying to hide? Today, we know that in the current Bible, there are several books missing. But let me go. I digress. So the Romans take control, and over a period of time, Egypt becomes Egypt and no longer Kemet. Okay? With that, you can imagine, just like with any type of war, when you have people or one nation conquering another nation, let's think of it. Europeans come into Africa and they conquer an African city or state. Okay? What do soldiers normally do when they're away from their homes and their women for a long time and they conquer another nation? You got it. They cohabit with the natives. You have a group of people. You have soldiers who are cohabiting with the women in Africa, and you get a whole melting pot going on, a whole race of people who no longer look just African or look just European. Could it be Arabic? Might they look like the Arabs? So the first melting pot was the Middle East, was Kemet. Okay, so around 53 BC, we have these Romans who basically come in and they seize control and they bring in their culture. They destroy books. And it wasn't until maybe 110 years later, around 64 AD, that the first type of Christianity comes about, and it's called Coptic Christianity. And that took place in Africa. You're always going to have these people saying, well, Christianity started out in Africa. Yeah, it did, after Europeans came and conquered, and then it started maybe 110 years later, as I said, around 64 AD. For the next 3 centuries, you had Europeans taking this new concept of Christianity that was created actually by Africans, but was borrowed, the concepts was borrowed by Europeans, and it went from being Coptic Christianity to a thing called Catholicism. It became an Orthodox type of Christianity, and under the leaders of people like the Rus, the European Rus, and under leaders like Justinian and under leaders like Constantine, it became a religion. Now understand, Constantine had 50 different versions of the Bible. That's right, 50 different. Now these 50 different versions were all in his era. Now, why did he have to have 50 different versions? If the word is God's word, we don't need to have a different version of God's word. That's like me telling you, How many different versions of God's word can there be? If it's God's word, it's one word. If I give you my word that I'm going to be at your house, there is no other version of I'm going to be at your house. If I give you my word that I'm going to meet you so we can study this knowledge and at 7:00, and then 7:00 comes and I said, well, that was a different version of 7:00. There is no other version. When people start talking versions, when people start coming up with different versions of theology, that's when you need to walk. And you may not agree. You may believe in alternative facts and alternative truths and all of this stuff. And then you want to believe, whatever it is that you believe, that you can have all these different versions. And in fact, today we have a version of the Bible that's a gay Bible. So, I don't know. And that's a different topic for another time. I digress. Understand, prior to this, Europeans in Rome believed in Mithra, and they believed that every year, that because it was getting dark during the winter solstice from December 25th all the way through January 1st, they celebrated the birth of a new god, because the god from the previous year had died or was being resurrected or coming to life, however you want to put it. But they believed that it was the birth of God. So it was from the winter solstice until January 1st where they would celebrate. How do you think they celebrated? So the ancient Romans had these celebrations called Saturnalia and Juvenalia. Check it out. Saturnalia, you had men, women, children. Juvenalia, that's when you celebrated juveniles reaching puberty. So they would have these huge feasts, and they would have food, and they would celebrate and dance and party, and men were having sex with men, and women were having sex with women, and men were having sex with girls, and girls were having sex with women, and women were having sex with boys. I think you get the picture. They had orgies. Now, in the northern part of Europe, a lot of people were celebrating this thing called Yule, and they had a fear of the dark too. So as it started getting dark during the year from winter solstice, a lot of people were feeling like, God was dying again, and that, the only way that they could survive was, to have faith that, there's somehow the spirits of Valhalla would bring them through the tough winter. And to remind them of that life can make it through winter, they would chop down a tree, and they would nail this tree to the floor inside of their cabins or whatever house they lived. They would burn a big Yule log. They would go out, find the biggest log they could, and burn this thing within their cabin. The sparks that would fly off from, when wood, the little embers that come flying off of it as it's burning, they would be like little prayers that they would say were going into the air. And they would say their prayers and think that these little sparks would speak to the gods in Valhalla and be able to bless them with a good harvest to come for the next year. That there would be plenty of fruit, there would be plenty of animals to have as livestock, and they wouldn't be starving, and that somehow they would make it through the tough winter, just like those strong pine trees that they had outside. Pine trees made it through the winter. So why couldn't they? Cutting down the tree and putting the cut down tree in the house was to remind people that you can survive. We can survive. We can get through this winter. You got to admire their survival. You got to admire their desire to live. You got to admire that. So what happens next? So over a period of time, you can imagine this is going on for hundreds of years, just like what was going on in Rome for hundreds of years. So along comes this concept of Christianity out of Northern Africa, Northeast Africa. And, a lot of people don't want to, join or become a part of this Christianity. It's something that is foreign to them. Just like you trying to listen to me telling you that Christmas is a pagan holiday and you need to leave it alone because it's all a money grab to get you to keep giving money to these multi-conglomerate corporations who just keep fattening their pockets and creating more policies to keep you and I poor. But that's another topic for another day. My point, just as hard as it is to convince people today that perhaps what they're believing in is a lie, it was hard to convince people in the northern part of Europe that Jesus was their Lord. And Jesus, in the name Jesus, and that's another story for another time, because there's over 100 different names for Jesus, probably 198 different names for Jesus, 12 of them that are more common to people that are spoken of in the Bible. So if you know anything about Europeans, you know how much they love to hold on to tradition. Now, today we call these people conservatives, and anything that is a part of their pastime, they want to keep that. Whatever it is about their past, they hold on to that pastime. They hold on to this pastime. So because they didn't want to let go of this pastime, it took a lot of converting to do. Okay, so for example, the winter solstice starts around December 21st. December 25th is one of the darkest days of the year. I mean, it gets dark early. It stays dark for a long time. So this was fear to them, just like, Samhain or the way that they have fear that evil spirits was coming out because it was dark. So they had to dress themselves like evil spirits so the spirits wouldn't be able to see them and they could cloak themselves. This is how they think, right? Okay, so it's not far-fetched. So just check it out. So you're not going to convince them, these people who are practicing Yule, you're not going to just make them stop practicing Yule, something that they have been doing for hundreds of years, for centuries, and then just all of a sudden come up and tell them, oh, Jesus is Lord. They've been doing this for thousands of years. They weren't giving up Yule unless they could continue practicing their Yule. They are not going to accept Christ until you made it so that the Romans could still continue to practice celebrating Mithra and Juvenalia and Saturnalia. They're not going to accept Jesus as their God. So a compromise was made. So people started saying, yeah, Jesus is Lord. As long as I can still practice my Juvenalia and my Saturnalia, I could still go ahead and practice Yule. May sound a little far-fetched, but it's not. Keep listening. So many of these Europeans in the North did not want to convert to this Christianity unless they could still practice Yule. So here we have today, Christmas is practiced by cutting down a tree, but standing it up in your house, whereas they used to nail it to the floor back in the days of ancient Norse people. Same thing with the Romans. The Romans were like, look, we're not going to practice any Christianity, any Catholicism that you're talking about. We love Mithra. We love to celebrate from the 25th until the first week of January. So what did that become? You had your Christmas holiday. You get off from from December 23rd. So you could do Christmas Eve, Christmas Day. You could do all those days in between, celebrate. And then on January 1st, New Year's hits, bam, you're getting drunk, you're getting high, you're partying, you're dancing, you're having sex, you're feasting. You're doing all of the things that they did back in the day. And you know what they say? When in Rome, do what the Romans do. When in Rome, you do as the Romans do. Okay. But today, I don't understand why Africans are doing it. This had nothing to do with us, but nevertheless, we're putting trees in our house and we do the same things that Europeans did, perhaps because it's so widespread, because one of the main things that Europeans wanted to do when they were seeking to control the world was to spread Christianity. And with this spread of Christianity came its beliefs, and with its beliefs came these lies, and these lies are based on lies that come from covering up the truth of what their original Immaculate Conception was that came out of Kemet. But that's another story for another time. So till this day, many people still believe that Jesus Christ was born on December 25th, when in fact he wasn't. If you read the scriptures, he was born during the time of the harvest. Now, it's kind of, a contradiction to say read the scriptures, even though we know that there's a lot of lies in the scriptures. There's a lot of truth in the scriptures too. It's kind of like when you give a child a recipe for the first time, you want them to go out and cook, and they try to cook and they keep getting it wrong, right? They keep messing it up. So you got to give them the recipe. You may even have to cook with them a little bit and work with them so that they understand how to cook this and prepare this meal, so they don't put too much salt, so they don't put too much, whatever the ingredient may be. It's the same thing with life. It's the same thing with the oldest people on the planet, namely Africans, and the youngest people on the planet, namely Europeans. So when you have these two people together, right, and you have one group that wants to seize control and do as the black or the African people did, but you want to do what the African people did and be able to rule a society for thousands of years. You want to be able to have your own dynasty that lasts for thousands of years. But you're missing some of the ingredients, because the same ones who are the masters of the ingredients, you subdue, you subjugate, you kill, you murder. So what they did was burn things and then try to make up by filling in the blanks for certain things, and they missed stuff. But they did catch things, and truth recognizes truth, things that make sense. For example, If God is a righteous God, why is God the only spirit in the Bible that's killing? Because the devil ain't killing at all. God drowned people for 40 days and 40 nights. God sent the locusts to cause famine and starvation. God killed the firstborn. God drowned the Kemetic people and Pharaoh's men in the Red Sea. I mean, so God is just killing everybody in the Bibles. You know, it makes me wonder why these same people who brought Christianity to us all over the globe are so murderous. What were the Crusades about? Was that not murder too? So today is supposed to be the celebration of the Son of God, you know, and that's a whole question in itself, because 3,000 years before the Bible was even created, longer than 3,000 years, you had a system in place where the Immaculate Conception was the coming together of a pure sister with a pure brother, or a pure woman with a pure man, and creating a pure child. That was the original Immaculate Conception. I mean, to somehow to twist it and, you know, say that God got her pregnant isn't totally off, because, you know, even in the book of Psalms, it refers to men as gods. And some people will say, oh, well, you're taking it out of context. It's only out of context when Europeans haven't said it. But when Europeans start to say it, then we start thinking, that's what it meant. Yeah, of course. I just needed a white person to say it. So if Jesus, Yeshua, Emmanuel, and the several other names was not born on the 25th of December, in fact, was born somewhere during the harvest, which would be around September, October, then what are we celebrating? What are you celebrating? How much money did you spend? Did you get drunk? Did you party? Did you dance? Did you have sex? Did you do all of the things that they did during ancient Rome? And understand, this theology is only less than 2,000 years old. But if all of that is not true, then what are we celebrating? What are you celebrating? How much money did you spend? How much money did you spend on groceries to feast? Did you go out and party on New Year's? Did you dance it out? Did you do the same things that they've been doing since the time of ancient Rome's Saturnalia and Juvenalia? So if Jesus, Yeshua, Emmanuel, and all the other names that we give the Son of God, and the stories that we've learned about the Son of God are not true, which they aren't. Unfortunately, they're not. But if they're not true, we'll still say if, big capital I, if the words that we've been learning all this time about Yeshua, Jesus being the Son of God are not true, and that he was born on the 25th of December, not true, and what are we celebrating? What are you celebrating? Did you go out and party come Christmas? Are you going to go out this year and party? Do you do that every year? I mean, I was a part of that. I remember back in the day, you know, it was like a tradition. You had to, man, you're not going out on New Year's. You're not going to drink. Here's a little champagne, get drunk. You know, everybody's dancing and partying until the ball drops. I remember going to see the ball drop in New York City. When the ball dropped, a woman jumped right in my arms. I mean, she was drunk out of her mind. But if all of this is not true, none of the things that we've learned about Yeshua, Jesus, his birth date, Christmas, if all of this is fabricated, and all of it is pagan, and all of it is part of a compromise in order to get Noah's people and the Romans to accept Jesus as their Lord, and this become a part of the new doctrine throughout Europe, which it did become. If all of this is a lie, then what are we celebrating? What are you celebrating? How much money did you spend? How many stores or store owners' pockets get fatter every year because you go out believing that you have to spend money to buy someone a gift? How many of you go out and buy trees that they cut down from the earth and you put them onto your floor and you decorate them with lights, and you believe somehow this North Star at the top, all of it is somehow a symbol of Jesus? a symbol of something virtuous, something righteous. And it's not. You're just spending your money every year based on a belief that was created and concocted off of the genocide, the destruction of an ancient civilization in Kemet, and concepts that came from it that was spawned by European theologies and continue to push lies in order to get you to spend more money and to believe in things that are not necessarily true. When you get a chance, just take a look. Take a look at how they celebrate Christmas in Belgium. See how they put on a black face in order to make a mockery of Black Pete or to pay homage to Black Pete. Black Pete was Santa's helper, if you didn't know. He's a brown-skinned man. You know, not black, but, you know, we're called black even though we're brown. And he's the one who comes down the chimney and he's all dusty with soot from the chimney. And he wears a shackle around his neck with a little, it's a collar for a dog. You know, I guess so Santa could keep him on a short leash. And if you're bad, you know, he knows when you've been sleeping. He knows when you're awake. He knows when you've been bad or good. So be good for goodness sake. Okay, so if you're not good, Black Pete comes to you, your children, and kidnaps your children. This is the one who has skin the color of mine. That's how they celebrate it in Belgium. Understand, man, you have 2 eyes for looking and 1 for seeing. Act accordingly. That's all I got.